We're on the air, folks. We're here. Guys, I'm suffering from some back pain. Did I tell you guys about this yet?
No, are you okay?
No.
I'm okay, dude, but so here's what happened. So I love omelet bars. You know, like when you go to a breakfast buffet and you just eat as many omelets as you want. You know what I'm talking about, Tom?
Yes.
They have a build your own omelet bar and you just order as many omelets as you want, and it's one flat price, even though that price is often not low. So I was at a hotel on vacation last week and had 2 omelets. And then I decided that I was going to have a third omelet. And Steph kind of gave me this look like, hey, are you sure you want to have a third omelet? And I said, it's been a while since I've had 3 omelets, but I've definitely had 3 omelets before. I think I can handle 3 omelets. And so I had the third omelet. This was after, doing a good workout in the morning and stuff. And I, as soon as I finished that third omelet, and 3 or 4 minutes passed, and then I started feeling this pain in my back. And that has been with me since Friday. And I don't know if it's connected to the omelet. You know what I mean? Could it be? I don't know. I'm going to the doctor tomorrow, so I'll find out.
Probably not.
I mean, what do you think it is?
It's probably the second omelet.
My theory is you're getting old.
Dude, this is not good. I mean, I don't like this whole getting old business, number one. And then number two, my back, I don't have full range of motion right now. It hurts. And I used to be able to touch my toes, no problem. And right now it's a little difficult to touch my toes. I can still do it, but it's just a little hard. I wake up after sleeping and my back hurts. After sleeping, I wake up and my back hurts. What's up with that? I sit for too long, my back hurts. So hopefully my doctor has some suggestions and, maybe I could do some physical therapy or something. I don't know. If you're listening to this and AJ lets this get in the show and you're one of our listeners and you've got some options or some ideas on how I can lower my back pain,
tweet it, Ruch it.
No, tweet at HeartlandCast, to be fair. That way we can then share that advice, not just with me, but with our listeners as well. I mean, don't you want our listeners to know how to avoid back pain as well?
No, just tweet Ruch it.
Yeah, dude. So what's going on, guys? What's happening?
It's chilling.
Yeah.
I don't really have any news per se,
You want to talk about this Graham-Durbin DACA compromise framework?
What's been going on?
Yeah, so I actually do, because I don't know anything about what's going on. And when I saw that in the show notes, I was like, so first of all, let me say something about our show notes to our listeners. And I think this is going to be a point which everyone will appreciate, at least for those that understand it. Our show notes are beginning to resemble the blockchain.
No, we're not doing crypto today.
The blocks for the show notes, dude, the blocks for the show notes are just so bulky.
Tom,
and it's just so slow. It's so slow. It's we're not.
I veto this crypto.
We're not Litecoin.
You're just trolling us now.
Oh my God.
Dude, it took some time to come up with that. That's pretty good. You gotta like that.
No, it didn't.
It did take some time to come up with that. What are you talking about?
Vox has a good explainer on what's going on in the DACA deal business. Is that interesting?
Okay, so can you back up and tell me what DACA is?
No,
people that don't know.
People know what DACA is. Come on, man.
Dude, it takes 2 seconds to explain it. Just explain it.
Okay, DACA is deferred action for childhood arrivals. So, let's say you came to this country as a child and you may not necessarily have been authorized by the government to come to this country, and there's a real question about whether deporting people from this country who have arrived as child and have lived their lives for all intents and purposes as Americans, there's a real question about whether deporting these people is a high priority for our Justice Department. And Obama said it was not a high priority for our Justice Department. And in fact, it was such a low priority for our Justice Department that they formalized their exercise of prosecutorial discretion into something called DACA. And people who are registered through the DACA program actually have authorization to work in the United States, so it's legal for employers to hire them, and they are entitled to be in the country. And it's not that the government couldn't ever deport them, but more to the point that the government has sort of said, "Don't worry, we're not going to deport you."
Okay, cool. That's what DACA is. How many people does DACA impact?
It's about 700,000.
So these are people that were brought here as children, most of them who the only life and only place that they know is the United States.
Yeah.
So what's the deal? Like, what's the current state of DACA?
So Donald Trump said that he's going to rescind DACA, and he isn't rescinding the existing work authorizations, but he's basically starting in March of 2018. He is no longer going to be. He's no longer going to allow the Justice Department to renew, or I think it might be to Homeland Security. Well, whatever. He's not going to allow them to renew work authorization. So these DACA permits expire every 2 years, so you have to constantly reapply. And he's saying that if you have an authorization that's expiring within a certain time period, then it's not too late for you to re-up. But basically, starting in March, there will be no more applications. And so if you're not eligible to reapply before March, then you just sort of expire when you expire. And, there are not going to be any new people in the program. People are going to drop out. And it's sort of like very worrisome for these people because, there was this like agreement with the government, like you're here and you're not authorized to be here and you're subject to deportation under the law. And the sort of tacit agreement between the government and these people is that, well, come and register and give us all your fingerprints and do a background check, and we promise not to deport you. And now it turns out, well, actually, now Trump's got a big registry of all of the unauthorized people who live in the country. So it's very sad. Anyway, there has been a legal challenge to that, and there's a court order that says that Trump has to continue the program beyond March of 2018. But who knows if that court order will be stayed or overturned on appeal or whatever.
So what's the government doing about it? Like, what are the various branches of government doing?
So I mean, when Trump when Trump signed his executive action on this program, he said, I really hope Congress fixes it. I hope Congress before March figures out what to do about DACA. And so congressmen have been working very hard on it. And there was a big meeting at the White House there were Republican senators and Democratic senators, and Trump was there, and Trump used the S word in an intemperate manner. And so, sort of negotiations are to a certain extent at a standstill. But what has been happening behind the scenes is that Lindsey Graham and Dick Durbin have come to like a proposed compromise. Now, to a certain extent, this compromise is sort of dead on arrival. I think both the House and the Senate have said that they're not planning to hold votes on any sort of bill that Trump intends to veto, and it does seem as though Trump would veto this sort of proposal.
So what does the proposal actually say?
Read the Vox Explainer.
Well, I was hoping you'd explain it, AJ.
Tom, can you read the Vox Explainer and then answer Richard's question?
I was hoping you'd do that work too.
Okay.
Tom and I were pretty clear on you, AJ, telling us about DACA. And we're just doing this to warm you up so you can then tell us about the North Carolina court, redistricting thing. We're just thinking this could be a warm-up for you.
So John Cornyn tweeted about this a couple days ago. He is the majority whip in the Senate, so he's like the number 2 Republican in the Senate.
And one of our senators from Texas, AJ. Don't forget that.
Well, I don't like to talk about that. So anyway, so Cornyn is the number 2 Republican in the Senate, and he said the Gang of Six deal to fix DACA will not get a vote in the House or the Senate because POTUS will not sign it. Let's go back to the drawing board and get this done. : border security, end diversity visa lottery, limit chain migration, and fix DACA. Now, here's the funny thing. Here's the funny thing about John Cornyn's tweet. The Graham-Durbin compromise would do all 4 of those things.
Yeah.
So anyway, here's the Graham-Durbin compromise. The DACA program would be legalized, and it would actually be slightly expanded. It would limit what is called chain migration, which I think is sort of a heartless way to talk about.
I think it is, but it is. Why don't you talk? What is chain migration?
It's. I mean, it's what anti-immigrant people use to describe the phenomenon where, you sort of come to the United States, and then once you obtain legal status, you use that legal status to help some of your family members also come, right? So you can you can sponsor your siblings or spouse or someone to come to America after you have obtained legal status.
Yeah, I didn't realize this was bad. Can I be honest about something? I didn't realize it was bad.
Yeah.
To have you come here and then your family comes here. It just seems kind of natural. Maybe that's because.
Did you see the tweet from the White House? It's time to end chain migration.
They make it seem. I didn't. They make it seem like there's a chain gang. You know what I mean, Tom? That you and I are prisoners and.
So this is going to be in the show notes, and take a look at this tweet. Basically, it's a tweet from the White House official, a Twitter, that says it's time to end chain migration, and they have sort of a pyramid scheme of one person that brings over 3 people, and each of those people bring over 3 more, and each of those bring 3 more, and more people come over. It is very, very tasteless, if it is the best thing I can say about it.
Yeah, I don't think I can even be that kind about it. I think this entire idea of being against chain migration, I guess it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, that's the term that the White House uses. I think a better term is that a lot of people use is family reunification. But another, I think, even more neutral term would be, family sponsorship, right? You're coming here based on, the sponsor, your sponsor for immigrating is a member of your family.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's because I'm a family migration. You know what I mean? I don't know if you are, Tom, but I am.
Yeah, I think all three of us are.
I'm not.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you came over.
I mean, I was a dependent. I was a dependent minor when my dad immigrated, but I wasn't it's not like my dad's sister immigrated and then we followed.
Well, I think that counts as chain migration.
Oh, well, in that case, I did chain migration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're one of the people underneath the people.
Yeah.
You're a foreign relative. As the White House would call it.
Yeah.
You're a child. You're your father's child, aka a foreign relative.
So there's some suggestion that
he's the single. No, AJ. He's the single immigrant admitted to the U.S. and you are the large number of foreign relatives.
The Canadian horde, if you will.
Yes, indeed. Those hordes and hordes of Canadians in there. I don't know. I think this debate is not complete, or this discussion is not complete without kind of saying no one has any statistical evidence that immigration is bad.
No, all the statistical evidence is that it's good.
All the economic evidence that's out there says that it's good. There's no evidence that it's bad. So I think they're starting with a premise, which is worth sort of pointing out, because I think one of the things that we do on the show, hopefully decently well, is sort of point out when people are just using tremendous amounts of bullshit, And I think this chain migration stuff is a good example of that. They're starting with a false premise, which is that immigration is bad. The second premise, which is also false, is that it's bad for families to come to the U.S. So this entire idea of lots of immigrants coming here, it causing negative effects to the country, it's just not factually correct. And I think that's the big premise that we got to kind of. I don't accept their frame from the beginning that immigration is bad, and nor do I believe that families coming over here together is bad. I think that's totally fine. I think that adds value.
A couple things. I think that I think it's important to, so it's a lot like free trade, right? So free trade is the economic evidence is that free trade tends to boost overall productivity, et cetera, right? It tends to make the countries that participate in bilateral free trade agreements tend to be wealthier because of their free trade agreements. But, there are people who are displaced, right? There are industries that suffer. There are individuals who are impacted, right? And so there is some extremely limited.
But that can be said about typewriters, okay? That can be said about answering machines. Like answering machines just displace people. Answering machines have displaced generations of secretaries that could have otherwise done a secretarial job.
Wait, AJ, what is the limited evidence that family reunification hurts people?
So I don't know if this is specifically about like family unification, right? But there is some limited evidence that when that increased immigration in an area can slightly impact people who are generally lower wage earners, that it can further depress their wages. It's it's extremely limited evidence. And overall, right, we could remediate it like much more easily by just, having more robust social assistance programs, which are much easier to pay for because increased immigration gooses aggregate demand in the jurisdiction, right? So overall, people are better off.
Let me hold on, stop. Let me ask you. Wouldn't that be true whether or not you had this family reunification or chain migration program, if you want to use the White House's term? It's that problem seems to be a problem of immigrants coming over, right? Let's assume that problem is an actual problem, right? Whether those immigrants come over because they're sponsored by a family member or for some other reason like the lottery or, whatever other system of immigration that you want to create, wouldn't that problem still be there?
Yeah. Yes and no, right? I think that sort of the overall goal for anti-immigration people is not like a specific policy, right? Like I don't think they are really upset about.
They just want fewer immigrants. And
fewer brown immigrants is the specific, because
like fewer brown, like some people want fewer immigrants and some people want fewer brown immigrants, but in both cases, right? Like I don't if you went to an immigration skeptic and asked them about like DACA, or you asked them about family unification, or you asked them about the diversity visa lottery, right? If you ask them about like any particular program, I don't think that they're sitting there thinking, the diversity visa program in particular is flawed, right? I think they just would like to have fewer immigrants, or in the alternative, they'd like to have fewer brown immigrants. Right. So anytime you're having a conversation and you ask, what about this specific policy? I think you're sort of missing the point.
Well, no, I think here's the thing. I guess I haven't seen any evidence that there's an actual, I've definitely heard stories, but to me, that's not evidence, right? Like, just because there's a story of some immigrant coming here and then, taking a job that used to be done by some random dude who lives in that community instead, to me, that's just the market at work, number one. Which I don't think is so bad. Number two, I guarantee you the answering machine killed way more jobs than immigrants did. Number three, I think this idea that wages go down because of immigrants, I think it's just a cover. Until I see the evidence myself, because I guess I haven't seen any. I've heard that argument in an anecdotal way, but never in an actual study type way. Until I see it myself and examine it myself, I guess, I think I'll just conclude that it's a cover. Not one that you're using, AJ, because I know you're not anti-immigrant, but a cover that some people are using to sort of be anti-immigrant, which is to say, well, immigration lowers American wages, and maybe they can find one or two examples of it in an anecdotal way. I don't even know if they can find any statistical evidence that suggests that that's actually the case,
Yeah.
I think the impact would be similar to, really similar to sort of answering machines and secretaries. You know what I mean? There may be some pockets where there are fewer jobs, but overall we're better off as a society.
Yes and no. I think it is extremely important for us to keep in mind that, when we have a policy like free trade or increased immigration that increases the overall wealth of a country, right? It increases GDP or, whatever it is that it does, right? I think it is extremely important to recognize that not all of those gains are shared equally by all people, right?
Yeah, I think that's true of all gains. I think that's true of all gains.
So but if the answering machine is making, if the answering machine is making women in Brooklyn poorer and making Jamie Dimon richer, like that, right? Like that, if that prosperity is not broadly shared, if that's not funneled back to individual people in terms of increased social services or increased opportunities, if they don't experience rising wages or rising services, then I think they're sort of justified in being very upset about the state of the country. I think they misplaced their anger by blaming immigrants in the first place because, immigration increases GDP and increases wealth and increases aggregate demand in areas where immigrants congregate. And so there's more money, and there should in fact be resources for more services for people that are in need of them, right? And so these people should be angry at their politicians or their political system or something else. I don't think that it is in their economic interest to be angry or justified to be angry at immigrants in these situations. But I don't think we should be totally unsympathetic or say something like, that's just the market at work, right? I think we should genuinely feel for these people. We should just understand that their anger may be misplaced.
Yeah,
I guess the issue for me is what is the evidence in the first place, right? Like I think
I agree.
I think that's what started this conversation, right? Like I think before you can say, well, there's going to be a group of people that are impacted, is that true?
So I mean, this is not the argument you're making, AJ. So I don't want to pin this on you because I don't think that's it's true, but there was in the union movement at one time, right, in the 60s and 50s, there was a belief that if there wasn't segregation and there were black workers, that would lower the wages of white people, and that was a way that unions were pitted against black workers, and or Mexican workers for that matter, and I think this is one thing which I think you may agree with, which is I think this is a way of just frankly dividing people, when the truth is that it's not that the immigrant is taking your money, it's that the immigrant is kind of creating a lot of wealth, and that wealth is not reaching you because of some political choices that have been made, right? In terms of how high taxes should be or what services should be provided or whatever else. I don't think there's, at least I haven't seen, I don't think I've seen any evidence.
Okay, so a couple of things to unpack there. One, I think that what you said about unions is sort of true in the specific case, but sort of not broadly true, right? Like it's one of those things where some unions said that and some unions didn't. So first of all, I don't think you would attribute those sentiments too broadly to the labor movement, although there certainly were individual unions that were caught up in that. But then more to the point, right? Like I think that is sort of another symptom of the same style of thinking. I guess what I would say is what you said is sort of broadly true, but not specifically true.
So, I've been on Google Scholar looking for studies on point, and I found one from 2012 in the Journal of the European Economic Association, which looked at data from the United States between 1990 and 2006, and it concluded that in that period, immigration had a small effect on wages of native workers with no high school degree, between 6% and plus 1.7%, and it also had a small positive effect on average native wages of 0.6, and a substantial negative effect on wages of previous immigrants in the long run.
Yeah.
So I think the conclusion here is that it's not on native workers that the immigrants have a negative impact on, but it's the of previous immigrants that immigration has a negative impact on.
Yeah, so I think you can find studies that say different things. The Matt Yglesias at Vox started writing a lot about immigration in 2015, sort of shortly after Trump announced his candidacy, and he wrote a series of articles, all basically, harping on sort of the same point, which is that even the most immigration skeptical academics were finding it very difficult to say that the immigrants are a negative impact on the U.S. economy, right? So the George Borjas is
that's the guy that's the guy that Stephen Miller, one of the president's advisors, constantly cites.
Yeah, so he's like a real immigration skeptic, right? I think he's sort of one of the front runners in terms of immigration skepticism. What he found, according to this Matt Yglesias article, is that, you know, immigration in the set of immigrants that Borjas studied, he said that they increased U.S. GDP by 1.6 trillion, and that 97.8% of that increase went to the immigrants themselves in the form of wages and benefits. But the thing Matt Yglesias says is like, yeah, that's less than 100%, right? Like even the most skeptical academic you can find says that, you know, even if it's only 2.2% of the increase in GDP caused by by immigrants working in our country, right? Like that's still a positive net benefit.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this is just it's just an anti-immigrant tinge, and I think like people would be better served maybe by talking about how should the economic pie be divided, not necessarily do immigrants take up too much of the pie, because I think the evidence that immigrants don't grow the pie is very, very, you know,
anyway,
is non-existent.
We've just been agreeing with each other for half an hour. Do we want to keep talking about this, or do you want to talk about North Carolina, or what do you want to do?
So I want to say one thing about the president's remarks, right? So the president, President Trump, remarked that he was wondering why don't more people from Norway come here, and he thinks that it's because of our immigration system and our immigration laws that we don't get more Norwegians here. And having been to Norway, I think it's because of Donald Trump that we don't get more Norwegians here. And, you know, if he disagrees with me, I'm willing, you know, if you're a Trump fan or Trump himself and you're listening to this, I'm willing to go on a trip that you pay for where I tell people Donald Trump has invited them to come to America. And we will, on this podcast, record those people's reactions when they're invited to America personally by Donald Trump. Because, I mean, the number of Trump jokes that I encountered in May of 2016 because of Donald Trump, pretty epic. Pretty epic. So I think that's why we don't have more people from Norway coming here.
There are several articles where they ask Norwegians about this, and they
really nice
respond thanks but no thanks. I'll link some of them into the show notes.
I mean, it was pretty. I mean, it was pretty shameful what Trump said. I think he just proved once again that he's a racist. I guess, you know, he basically referred to for those that, you know, maybe didn't catch this, although I'm sure most people did. You know, he referred to Haiti and others as shithole countries, which is rich coming from a guy who grew up in Queens. I mean, you know, zing. Anyone? No. Queens is wonderful. I'm joking. I'm just trying to hate on Donald Trump. It's a tough crowd today.
Does Rucho think our audience can hear us?
So AJ, you've been especially obsessed with the state of North Carolina and how it no longer qualifies as a democracy. So I thought it would be only fair to make you do all the work here. So what's happening here with North Carolina redistricting? Like, what's the deal?
Okay, so this is interesting. North Carolina did some redistricting, and I think it was in 2011, and the court found that it was an unconstitutional racial gerrymander, and so North Carolina was sent back to the drawing board. What they did when they went back to the drawing board is they said, okay, we will redo our maps without using race as a criterion, but we've got 10 Republican districts, and we've got 3 Democratic districts for congressional districts, and we're going to redo our districts in a way that still gives us 10 Republicans and 3 districts. And this is not just something that you piece together from circumstantial evidence. This is what was in the legislative record.
Can I tell a funny story from that opinion about this whole redistricting business?
Yeah, go for it,
please.
So the North Carolina Republicans formed a committee of several individuals, but 25 Republicans and I think like a dozen or so Democrats to do this redistricting. And in part of the committee meetings, they offered this plan to give Republicans a 10-3 advantage in favor of Republicans, and Democratic state senator objected to this ingraining 10-3 advantage in favor of Republicans as unfair, unreasonable, and not very balanced. And in response, the Republicans said, well, look, the reason we did this plan as a 10-3, 10 Republicans and 3 Democrats is because we don't really think it's possible to get a map where you have 11 Republicans and only 2 Democrats.
I was stunned by the honesty, I guess, if you want to call it that, of the folks that did the drawing of the districts. They said, we drew them to elect as many Republicans as possible. We called it like Max Red or whatever it's called. Yeah. Red Plan, I think, is what the plan was called.
What was crazy from reading this opinion was that when they were deciding on creating these maps, there was an individual named Dr. Thomas Hofeller.
It's a real redistricting genius name.
Yeah. Who worked as the redistricting coordinator for the National Republican Committee. And so what these senators or these state representatives in the Republican Party that were responsible for pushing forward these new maps invited this individual over to their house and had an off-the-books conversation that was not in any way recorded or written down, where they instructed him, according to the trial record, to form a partisan map that would preserve 10-3 advantage for Republicans. The fact that he never put any of this down in writing as to his specific instructions makes me believe that was not all that was said in that room. But, I'm just speculating, I guess. To borrow a phrase from the former director of the FBI, Lordy, I hope there are tapes.
Yeah. So anyway, what the court said is that this, you can't have, so Hofeller hadn't written this down, but it was in the legislative history, right? Like, it was in the legislative background of the maps that the legislators had written to each other that their intention was to preserve the 10-3 split.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but that's what I'm saying is if that's what they were willing to write down, what were they saying in those off the record, non-written conversations in individuals' private homes, Yeah. The other thing that I sort of took away from this, is how the court reached its conclusions, because that might be something that would be helpful for folks to understand, right? That this case is an equal protection case, meaning, an individuals in North Carolina are suing the because they believe they're not treated equally with other individuals when you have a partisan map like this.
Right.
So, and the court found, yes, there was a violation of these individuals' rights.
So let me ask, why was the court finding this, given that the Supreme Court has a case, which we've discussed in a prior episode, where they haven't ruled on the constitutionality of partisan gerrymandering yet?
I mean, you can't turn off the entire litigation docket in every state once a court decides to take up a case, right? So there are 2 gerrymanders that the Supreme Court is going to take up this term, the Maryland one and the Wisconsin one. And so those cases are pending at the Supreme Court. And so that Rucho's question is basically, well, the Supreme Court is going to take care of this. Why is the district court wading into this while those Supreme Court cases for Wisconsin and Maryland are pending? And the answer is that, North Carolina has real problems, and the 2018 midterms are coming up sooner than you think, and you can't just turn off the judge's docket just because there's some case over at the Supreme Court, right? Like, there was a case pending and the judge ruled on it. It's actually a 3-judge panel, but you know what I mean, right? Like, I think it's you also want to have this case position when the Supreme Court sort of says whatever it is it wants the lower courts to do, you want this court position to go ahead and implement that, right? And so the judges held their trial, they had their evidentiary hearing, they, the witnesses were questions, and then, at the appropriate time on January 9th, after taking a little while to write it, they wrote their opinion and they filed it, right? I mean, I think that's exactly what you would want courts to be doing at this time.
Makes sense.
So anyway, there's a really good podcast that you could listen to about this. It's called Everything We Know About the American Heartland. But there's also a really good podcast called it's an episode of the WooCast, which is something that's run by Princeton University. But Sam Wong, who runs Princeton Election Consortium. Is that what it is? PEC, whatever it is. So he was on the podcast and he sort of talked about his big takeaway from this North Carolina order. And so, listen to that. Go listen to that. Don't listen to us anymore. Check our show notes. Click on that. Stop listening to our show.
Don't do that. Don't listen to.
Yeah, don't listen to the show.
AJ, that's terrible, dude. Like, you can't go around telling people not to listen to our show when they're in the middle of the show. Before the show, maybe, but not after they've wasted this much time. At least let them get to the sidebars.
They've got a sunk cost, dude.
Yeah.
And so, the legislature has a couple weeks to come back with some maps. And if they aren't able to come back with satisfactory maps within a couple weeks, then the federal court is going to appoint a special master to do the mapping. And I guess the court's goal is to have this implemented in time for the 2018 midterms, which is sooner than you think, right? Like, you think, oh, the election's in November and that's fine. But the primary is probably in March or April.
Yeah, it is right around the corner. I mean, and we're talking less than 2 months, most likely.
I mean, it's like these maps need to they need to get figured out pretty quick. So this is interesting. This is like a very interesting time to be thinking about these issues.
If you say so.
The one thing that I didn't quite appreciate was how sort of this came to be, in the sense that the Republicans won the state legislature.
For the first time in 100 years.
And then they drew a map that gave them a 10-3 majority. Excuse me. Despite the fact that in the last congressional election, they had actually won fewer votes when you tally all the congressional votes up than the Democrats had won. So they were trying to turn a lot less than 50% of the vote into a 10-3 in Congress.
Didn't they actually do that?
Yeah, which is pretty bold. Yeah, they succeeded.
They succeeded in doing that.
Yeah. They succeeded in doing that, which is pretty bold and is proof that this map making software, or at least this Dr. Hamhofer guy, is pretty good. What's his name? I don't remember his name.
I think we can just call him Hamhofer from now on.
Hamhofer, if you're out there, I think we're willing to have you on the show.
Yeah.
Like, Tom, can we tweet at Hamhofer? This reminds me of the time when Tom purposely misspelled Jamie Dimon's name in an email to Jamie Dimon. But it got you a response, Tom. So maybe we should do the same thing with this Hamhofer guy.
So here's the deal. So you've got the Maryland partisan gerrymander being heard by the Supreme Court. You've got the Wisconsin partisan gerrymander being heard by the Supreme Court. Now you've got this North Carolina order. I mean, do you feel like this is a trend? Do you feel like this is an issue that has sort of reached a climax? Do you think we're going to keep hearing about this? Or, I mean, do you think this is a blip that could disappear sooner rather than later?
I think we're going to keep hearing about it. And I think it's because Kennedy's going to write an incomprehensible opinion. And as a result, there's going to be continued litigation around this issue, because he's going to write an opinion that is, bold but not clear.
We'll see.
And so I think we're going to be having a lot more. I think we'll have a lot more partisan gerrymandering litigation, because I'm not sure that the legal standard that he's going to create out of this is going to be particularly clear. That's my view.
We'll see.
That said, Justice Kennedy, if you're listening to this, please don't retire.
Please, okay. Can you retire as soon as there's a Democratic president?
Okay, so Are we ready to put a bow on this? Move on to our next thing?
I think we are.
Yeah, what's the next thing?
Well, here's what I'm prepared to talk about. I have some questions about this Donald Trump porn sex scandal.
Oh, dope.
Legal questions.
Oh, okay.
We can
okay,
also
I like
talk
that.
about...
I like that.
We can also go to Supreme Court predictions, where I'll have legal questions about that as well. Or we can go straight to the sidebar. What do you guys want to do?
Here's what I propose. How much time should we budget for the porn?
Oh, not very long. So let's do it real quick.
All right, let's do it.
Are we going to name this episode "Everything We Know About Stormy"? What's her name?
Everything We Know About
McWilliams
Stormy
or something
Daniels.
like-
Episode title.
Stormy.
We did it. Everything We Know About Stormy Daniels. Is it Stormy or Storm?
Stormy, I think actually.
It's Stormy Daniels.
Yeah.
so
say her name
basically-
right,
so-
AJ.
Oh, I made a huge mistake. I just Googled Stormy Daniels. Oh. No, I just realized. I'm so glad I'm not on a work computer right now.
Yeah, oh my god.
Oh,
Honestly,
goodness.
though, I think this is one of those situations why I wouldn't do it from my work computer. But this is news right now.
Trump allegedly told Stormy Daniels she reminded him of Ivanka.
Oh no, are you being serious?
Oh, I do kind of see the
Yeah.
resemblance.
So hold on. Let's give a little background first. All right. So Stormy Daniels is a porn star who has done a lot of porn. They met sometime in 2006 after Donald Trump was married to Melania, but while Melania was pregnant with Barron Trump, and Stormy Daniels claims that she and Trump had a sexual relationship. In which, that over the course of a couple of weeks, I think, or a few weeks, in 2011, she gave an interview to I guess, magazine, some publication named
In Touch Weekly.
In Touch Weekly.
Which is not a porn magazine, by the way.
So it was a recorded interview. And then sometime after that, she got some hush money from Donald Trump's private counsel,
Michael Cohen,
$130,000, not to say anything. Recently, within the last couple weeks, this magazine has...
And the Wall Street Journal broke this story, by the way. The Wall Street Journal broke the story about the hush money. So it wasn't like a National Enquirer special, right? It was...
And since then, the In Touch magazine released a little preview article about this, and then said they were going to publish the entire interview with Stormy Daniels about Donald Trump and her affair. So here are my legal questions about this, right?
Yes.
So she is under a non-disclosure agreement with the President of the United States, right? She obviously is claiming that she had an affair. Donald Trump has denied this, right? So potentially she could have a defamation claim. Let's just assume she has a defamation claim, right? What happens to the non-disclosure agreement, right? Let's say she sues Donald Trump for defamation, but obviously there's this non-disclosure agreement saying she can't talk. Would Trump just move, or Trump's attorneys move for some sort of protective order? What do you guys think about this? Like, what happens to the non-disclosure agreement if she sues?
I mean, I guess it depends on what the non-disclosure agreement says.
The Smoking Gun actually wrote about this in October 2016, by the way.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. Donald Trump and the porn superstar. Oh, GOP nominee was pals with. It doesn't say anything about them having sex, I guess. Can I say? So I think, Tom, that there would probably... I hope she gets Gloria Allred, right? Like, I hope she gets Gloria Allred to be her lawyer. And I hope they sue. And I hope they sue him for defamation, or if they try and push her to shut up through the confidentiality agreement. I hope she. I mean, because what damages can he get? You know what I mean?
So here's the jam,
Like-
right? Let's say, how do you enforce the non-disclosure agreement without admitting that a non-disclosure agreement exists, right? So like Donald Trump sues Stormy Daniels, right?
Probably an arbitration or something. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, what you'd have to do is sue under seal, right? You'd basically file a lawsuit, and you'd have to convince the court that your lawsuit has such importance or that it should be kept completely secret from the public. I would think there would be a compelling, public reason to know what the president of the United States is suing about, but that's just my guess.
It would be hard for me to imagine. I mean, do you think there's a judge who would really let Trump seal his complaint?
Well, Trump has appointed and confirmed, or nominated and confirmed, several federal judges.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily. I mean, listen. I don't think, Tom. I wouldn't want to create the impression, just because I don't think it's true. Or at least I hope it's not true, that they would rule for Trump just because he appointed them any more than a judge would rule for Obama because he appointed them. Or
Trump,
so
I will
on and so
100% seal your complaint if you appoint me to the federal bench.
AJ, but AJ, what if they just sue in like Florida or something? Are you willing to move to Florida?
Yeah, I'll move to Florida. Get me on that bench.
Well, I mean, Trump would have to sue in AJ's court.
No, think about it. It's the perfect crime, right? I go to Trump. I tell him, look, I'll file your case under seal. He appoints me to the bench. Mitch McConnell rams it through. The Dems filibuster. Don't worry about it. There's no more filibuster. There's no more 60 vote threshold on judges. All right, I'm in. I'm on the bench. I got this for life. You know what I do next?
What do you do next?
Do Trump a solid.
Where's the tax returns? I sign a subpoena for the tax returns.
Oh, snap.
It's the perfect crime.
But what about the Stormy Daniels case? Will you at least help him out on that one?
I don't know. I don't care. Probably.
Depends on the facts.
You know what? I would
law.
100% be willing to seal the Stormy Daniels complaint if it meant getting the tax returns or the P-tape.
It's funny as this is the president of the United States we're talking about.
Tell me I'm wrong. You would do it too.
Oh my gosh.
All right, Tom. What do you got? What's your Supreme Court case?
Okay, so Supreme Court predictions?
Yeah.
Okay, I've got a couple, and these are not as sexy as Gill v. Whitford, the redistricting case, but I think these will demonstrate will demonstrate the sort of everyday work that the court does. So one case involves our favorite governor from New Jersey, Christie, versus the National Collegiate Athletic Association, and it also involves sports betting. This case tackles the difference between what's called commandeering and preemption. So the federal government can preempt laws of the states. It's in the Constitution. It's called the Supremacy Clause. There's nothing the states can do about it. When the federal government says, you know what, I'm going to pass a law, my law is superior to piddly little state laws, right? So my law goes into effect, and any laws that conflict with my law created by the states, they have no effect. What the federal government cannot do is they cannot take over a state and force states or its employees to do its bidding. Basically, this is called commandeering the state. The question in this Christie v. National Collegiate Athletic Association case is, if the federal government passes a law that prevents the state from repealing or modifying their laws banning sports betting, is that preemption or is that commandeering? Specifically, the technical legal issue is, does a federal statute that prohibits modification or repeal of state laws prohibiting private conduct impermissibly commandeer the regulatory power of the states? But basically what it means is, if the federal government passes this law that prevents a state from repealing or modifying their laws, is that preemption or commandeering? So for a little background, in 1992, Congress passed the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, PASPA. This law effectively banned sports betting with a few limitations. Generally, the law made it illegal for government entities to sponsor or private entities to operate a sports betting scheme. In 2012, New Jersey passed a law authorizing sports betting and argued that PASPA commandeers states to enforce the federal ban on sports betting. Third Circuit held, that it did not apply. The anti-commandeering doctrine did not apply to PASPA because PASPA does not require the states to do anything. It simply bars them from allowing sports betting. The Supreme Court denied cert on that issue. So in 2014, after the decision from the Third Circuit became final, New Jersey state legislature passed a law that basically repealed their prior prohibition on sports betting. Third Circuit held that New Jersey is now basically trying to expressly authorize sports betting in violation of PASPA, and they're just trying to get around the previous decision by couching their law in terms of a repeal. The question in the Third Circuit basically held that doesn't pass muster, and New Jersey's just trying to do the same things it did in the 2012 case. The Supreme Court took cert on the issue, and New Jersey is arguing, look, in the 2012 case, the government represented to the Third Circuit that if New Jersey wanted to, they could repeal their law, which is exactly what New Jersey is doing in this instance. And now the federal government is saying, well, no, you can't repeal the law to allow sports betting when in the first place you couldn't pass a law to authorize sports betting specifically. Does that make sense?
Not really, actually, to me.
Okay, so ask me questions.
Yeah, sure. So what's the difference between what New Jersey did in 2012 and 20 whatever afterwards?
Well, so that's what the Third Circuit would tell you. Look, there's no difference. So what's New Jersey's argument for why there is a difference? Yeah. Well, so in 2012, New Jersey passed a law that specifically authorized sports betting, right?
Okay.
The law said, look, you as a private individual, here's this scheme of sports betting that you can do, right? And we would give you the blessing of the state of New Jersey, right? The federal government in 2012 said, whoa, we have this law called PASPA, and the PASPA law says that you can't pass laws authorizing sports betting.
Yeah, makes sense. Sure.
Right. So,
makes sense.
When they were arguing to the Third Circuit why, this is preemption and not commandeering, right? They're saying, well, it's preemption because it prevents them. It prevents the law from taking effect because it conflicts with PASPA, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
And it told them, well, it's not commandeering because, for example, we're not because at the end of the day, what it comes down to is PASPA prevents them from, implementing certain actions, right? As a state from doing certain things, right? Such as authorizing sports betting schemes, right?
Sure.
And so in 2012, the federal government said, look, if New Jersey wanted to, they could repeal their ban on sports betting, because at the time they had a ban on sports betting, right? And they were trying to get around that ban by specifically authorizing sports betting, okay? And the federal government said that, yeah, that would be permissible. So in 2014, New Jersey went and said, whoa, well, this is exactly what we did. We did what the government told us to do, and we repealed our ban on these gambling schemes, and that allows sports betting to occur, and what the government is now saying is, well, that's not permissible either. We didn't think that you would actually do it.
Yeah, I'm with the Third Circuit on this one. Like, this seems like just a cute way for New Jersey to do what it wants to do. I mean, because the thing is there's a federal law. It says you can't have this type of scheme. The federal government can certainly say there are certain things the states cannot do. It does it all the time. You know what I mean? So now if you say, well, the states just have to pass a law that says you can do it, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me how it's any different. I really don't. I'm still not quite clear.
I guess finer point on it, right? In this specific case, the 2014 current case, the government is literally telling a state, you cannot repeal one of your laws. You have to keep a law on the books, right? And so that's the state's argument is, well, if we have to keep a law on the books, what you're in effect telling us is we have to...
You're commandeering our legislature.
Not just that. What you're in effect telling us is we have to enforce that law as well, right? Because, the government wouldn't be cool with them just keeping the law on the books but not enforcing it.
I don't understand why New Jersey can't just repeal the law. Sorry, I know that's the central question of the case. Like, it's like, right? Like, I might as well have just said like, I don't understand. Like, I don't understand why they can't just do partisan gerrymanders. So, but I guess my point is that like, what is the difference between repealing the law and not repealing the law? Right? Like, imagine New Jersey.
Okay, so let me put in a finer. Let me talk about preemption, right? If let's say I'm the federal government and Rucho is the state of Texas, right? And I pass a law in the federal level that says, no one is allowed to smoke marijuana, right? And Rucho passes a law at the state of Texas and says everyone in the state of Texas is allowed to smoke marijuana, right? Those two laws.
I mean, that's true in some states, right?
Well, yeah. But let's go with me, right? Those two laws conflict, right? If there is a person who is trying to smoke marijuana, right, and says, I'm acting within the authority of the state, right, to smoke this marijuana, and the federal government goes after them, right, under the federal law, they can't rely on the state law because the federal law preempts that state law. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, I mean, that's basic preemption, right?
But okay, so here's what happens in that situation, right? Like the state of Texas says it's legal to smoke marijuana, the federal government says it's not, and you smoke marijuana and you get caught, and that means you can be prosecuted in federal court, but there's no state court that can prosecute you, right? But my understanding of preemption is that it invalidates state laws, right? So imagine the federal government says states can't forbid smoking marijuana, and Texas tried to do it, right? Like that would that law would be preempted, right? But I don't understand, like so why does the federal government care whether it's a state crime in New Jersey to have unauthorized gambling?
Oh, well, that is the issue, right? If the federal government, from the federal government's standpoint, they're saying we're trying to prevent sports gambling operations completely, right? And if the as authorized by state law, and so if the state says to the federal government, or if the state creates a sports betting operation, right, it would be preempted by PASPA.
So to me, is the issue that New Jersey doesn't want to enforce federal law? Like, is that the issue? Like, they're sitting.
Well, that's what New Jersey's. That's New Jersey's argument, right?
So let's say that the court holds that this is commandeering. Let's try and walk this through the scenario, okay? Or that it isn't commandeering, I should say. Does this mean now that the state of New Jersey has to enforce federal law? Like, is that the practical effect?
I mean, that's what the state of New Jersey would tell you, right?
I don't think the federal government can tell New Jersey that New Jersey has to ban gambling.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, that's what New Jersey is saying, right?
So maybe I agree with New Jersey, which is
I agree with New Jersey.
So maybe this is the issue, right? Is that the law is absolutely preempted? You know what I mean? That any law that New Jersey passes on this topic would be preempted. But New Jersey has the right to pass whatever stupid law it wants to pass, right? Like, I think that's where this potentially comes down. It's like, the feds can't force New Jersey to pass any law or not pass any law as it relates to this gambling issue. But
well, so here's what PASPA says, right? PASPA says it shall be unlawful for a government entity to sponsor, operate, advertise, promote, license, or authorize by law or compact a lottery, sweepstakes, sports betting, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, that does make sense. Yeah. So it's saying, so if New Jersey said, listen, we want to start a sports betting operation, PASPA would say you cannot do that. Huh. Interesting.
But that's not what New Jersey is trying to do right now, right?
Yeah.
So-
No, New Jersey is basically trying to remove any law that it has related to sports gambling that would prevent gambling. Yeah. I think New Jersey's right.
So is the argument that repealing the law is a way of promoting gambling?
It's a way of authorizing sports betting. Yeah.
Yeah, so the wording of the law, the wording of PASPA seems really important here, which is that it is telling the state it is not if it was so here's something. If it said gambling in sports is illegal. If it said that, right? There's nothing New Jersey could do to contradict that law, okay? That would be a clear case of preemption in my mind. And there's nothing that New Jersey could say that would really credibly make it commandeering, because it's just an area where the federal government is saying, hey, this is an interstate commerce issue. We have the right to regulate, and we're just saying it's illegal. Sports betting is illegal, okay? But what PASPA is saying is that the state shall not pass a law that permits it. And to me, I'm in agreement with New Jersey, actually, I think.
You've got New Jersey's position, right? But
yeah.
Let's say the law were that, no one shall sponsor, operate, advertise, promote, license, or authorize, a sports betting scheme, right? And New Jersey tried to sponsor, operate, advertise, promote, or license a sports betting scheme, right? That would be preempted, wouldn't it?
Yes, if they said no one shall. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So what is the difference between that scenario? This is the government's argument. What is the difference between that scenario and this scenario?
Because New Jersey's not promoting a scheme. There's no particular scheme that New Jersey's promoting.
Well, they're authorizing. Yeah, I mean, they would be authorizing that scheme.
No, they would say nothing is preventing it, right? So, like, here's an example, right? The federal law, bans marijuana. Okay. Now, if federal law said no state shall pass a law that allows the use of marijuana, to me, that is different than saying marijuana is illegal under federal law. Okay. One tells the state what it can and cannot do. Okay. The other merely states law. And so I think it's the wording of the statute, which I don't understand why the statute was worded that way, because I think they set them up to a clever kind of commandeering challenge. Because,
all right, I think it's going to be 6-3 for New Jersey.
6-3 for Christie.
Yeah.
AJ, Ruch, what do you say?
I think that it's going to be 7-2 for New Jersey. I think the dissenters are going to be Kagan and Sotomayor.
You guys are a lot more bullish on this than I am. I think 5-4 for Christie, New Jersey. Just because it's just one of these cases that it is really close, right? Like, there's good arguments on both sides. I can see the federal government's perspective in the sense that, the practical effect of this law is we're just outlawing sports betting, right? And of course, New Jersey's argument is, well, you're requiring us to, keep a law on the books and enforce that law. So I don't know. Maybe, and probably it might be a lot more than a 5-4. That 5-4 probably reflects more my belief of how close the case is than what the judges will vote, I think. So maybe I should change that, but who knows?
I think it's largely just they wrote a kind of a poorly, weirdly worded law. You know what I mean?
So let's do sidebars.
Yeah.
My sidebar is Hardcore History, which is a podcast by Dan Carlin, and the
Great podcast.
Great podcast. The latest episode is called The Celtic Holocaust, and it is about the Roman conquest of Gaul. It's about a 5-hour long episode. I listened to it in like multiple.
He loves
sittings.
doing this stuff. Like Dan Carlin, he just does this. I don't know how he does it. How does he talk for like?
I mean, the answer is that it takes him months to produce a podcast, right? I'm sure that it could be as many as like a dozen,
kind of like us,
recording.
You know?
Yeah, I think that's like a dozen recording sessions to get one 5-hour episode. Anyway, the way hardcore history has an interesting business model. Basically, the latest sort of like year or two is free from their RSS feed and your podcast player of choice. I use Overcast. Thanks for Forecast. Thanks. That's what we use for chapters in our. Okay. Anyway, so you can buy the back catalog on iTunes because it goes back years and years and years. So anyway, I recommend. I mean, I've been listening for like 6 or 7 years now. I totally recommend the latest episode, Celtic Holocaust. It's 5 hours about the Roman conquest of Gaul.
No, but I actually just wanted to recommend. He keeps on his library Blueprint for Armageddon, which is about World War I, and it's just a 5-part series, and it is amazing.
Oh my god, it's so good.
Yeah.
Oh, but his description of like living conditions in the trenches is like really upsetting. Like genuine trigger warning on that.
My sidebar is JFK's father, Joe Kennedy. Avoided the 1929 stock market collapse after a shoeshine boy gave him a stock tip, and he thought if shoeshine boys are giving out stock tips, the market is too hot, and so he pulled out of the market right before the collapse.
Oh, that's pretty funny.
It's a funny little anecdote, but like when I read stories like this, I kind of, maybe I'm just too paranoid or too skeptical. I wonder how much of that is him trying to cover up some insider trading by creating a cute little anecdote that is probably unrelated to the inside knowledge he had. You know?
Huh.
I think you're probably right, honestly, Tom.
You know, because he's like a shoeshine boy gave him some stock tips. He figured that when shoeshine boys have tips, the market is too popular for its own good, and he pulled out.
He was also a racist against Jews.
He was also a apologist for Hitler, and was that was actually something that was for the Kennedy brothers, for primarily Jack and Bobby. That was a big thing in their political careers, was sort of proving that they were not like their father in terms of just willing to appease Hitler or appease foreign foes. That was a big deal. I've been listening to this book on Bobby Kennedy, actually, by Chris Matthews, which I think is pretty good.
Huh.
So if you're looking for an audio book,
Ruch, I'm vetoing your sidebar. I'm looking at the Google Doc and I'm vetoing your sidebar.
Dude, you can't veto people's.
You've already done this sidebar. You've done this sidebar.
I haven't done that sidebar.
I veto your sidebar. First of all, you've already done this sidebar in a previous episode.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, you absolutely have. You tried to do it
when?
You tried to do it in the last episode, and Tom vetoed it.
So you're saying that I haven't done it?
No, I veto your sidebar. Your sidebar is now the Chris Matthews book you talked about.
Oh my god.
No.
God, I was gonna use this sidebar as a segue
into talking about crypto, which is unacceptable. I'm going to bed.
No, there's.
No, good night, y'all. Lily needs the room.
Tom, are you gonna let this stand?
He's editing it, dude.
Yeah, here's the deal. Here's the deal. Here's the deal. Your crypto sidebar is not in the episode, no matter what. The real question is, do I leave in the part where I talk about vetoing it, or do we just cut to the music?
I would also
when
recommend...
AJ is not looking up Stormy Daniels.
Interrupt me.
So no, I just had a funny joke. Sorry, Tom. When AJ is not when AJ is not looking up Stormy Daniels at work,
you know what's
he's listening to these.
Hold
podcasts.
on. Let me interrupt you now.
Go.
It's not very good, is it? It doesn't feel very good, does it?